You throw away more animal matter in a week than a Viking family wasted in a year. Not because you're wasteful by nature, because you've never had to calculate the caloric cost of waste. Every discarded bone, tendon, or organ represents energy you can't retrieve. In environments where winter lasted 8 months, that miscalculation killed families. You don't respect the animal. You've just never needed to. This is not about respect for nature. It's not about spirituality or ancient wisdom. This is about efficiency systems developed by people who couldn't afford thermodynamic losses. When you can't replace what you waste, you don't waste. Vikings didn't honor the animal through ceremony. They honored it through complete utilization. Every part had a function because the environment punished redundancy. No grocery stores, no supply chains, no second chances. Only methods that extracted maximum value from finite resources. This video examines one system, complete animal processing, not as philosophy, as survival engineering. Northern Scandinavia operated on negative returns for 8 months yearly, below freezing temperatures, minimal daylight, zero agricultural output during winter. Animals were slaughtered in autumn because feed couldn't sustain them through winter. Each animal represented a fixed caloric bank. The environment didn't provide abundance. It provided single opportunities. 1 cow, 1 pig, 1 sil. That animal contained everything you'd use until spring. Food, tools, clothing, fuel, building materials, medicine. The question wasn't whether to use the whole animal. The question was how to extract function from every gram of tissue before decomposition or predation removed it from your resource base. Waste wasn't immoral. It was thermodynamically stupid. You burned calories acquiring the animal. Discarding usable material meant burning calories for nothing. Modern humans have never performed comprehensive resource extraction. We buy pre-processed materials. Meat comes in cuts. Leather comes finished. Tools come manufactured. We've never had to look at a dead animal and see 12 different material categories. We lack the knowledge base to identify which tissues serve which functions. We don't know that sinew makes superior cordage, that intestines create waterproof storage, that hooves yield glue stronger than many modern adhesives, that bladders become liquid containers, that contain marrow, to material and when burned, fertile. Our limitation isn't physical, it's categorical. We see meat and waste. Vikings saw primary calories, secondary calories, structural materials, flexible materials, adhesives, insulation, fuel, and medical supplies. Same animal, different cognitive framework. We're not less intelligent. We're less practiced at scarcity-based categorization. And in any resource-constrained environment, that cognitive gap is lethal. The problem, an animal carcass decomposes rapidly, tissue breaks down, value disappears. You have a narrow processing window to convert biological matter into stable, storable resources before entropy wins. The Viking solution, systematic processing based on tissue stability and functional priority. Nothing was decorative. Everything was engineering. Primary tier, immediate processing. Meat was the primary caloric source, but also the most perishable. It was consumed fresh, dried into preserved strips or salted. Organs were eaten immediately because they spoil fastest but contain the highest nutrient density. Liver for iron and vitamin A, kidneys for B vitamins, heart for protein and CoQ10. Blood was collected and mixed with fat and grain to create blood sausage, preventing protein loss. Secondary tier structural materials. Hide became clothing, shoes, bags, shield covers, and shelter reinforcement. Processing required scraping, stretching, and treating with animal brains which contain the exact enzymes needed for leather tanning. Bones became needles, fish hooks, knife handles, and structural supports. Long bones were split to extract marrow-pure fat, critical for caloric density. Antlers and horns were carved into combs, buttons, and tool handles. Hooves were boiled down to extract collagen, creating adhesive for weapon construction and boat sealing. Tertiary tier, specialized materials. Sinew was dried and separated into fibers, for thread and bowstring stronger, and more durable than plant fiber in wet conditions. Intestines were cleaned and used as waterproof storage for food and liquids. Bladders became canteens. Stomachs were used as cooking vessels filled with water and hot stones, and you can boil food without metal pots. Fat was rendered into tallow for candles, waterproofing, and cooking. Even the skull was kept used as a scoop, a container, or burned for bone char to improve soil. Why it works? This isn't sentimental. It's thermodynamic optimization. Each tissue has a molecular structure suited to specific functions. Sinew's collagen fibers align longitudinally ideal for tensile strength. Intestinal lining is naturally waterproof due to mucous membranes. Bone collagen converts to gelatin when boiled, a natural adhesive. Vikings didn't invent these properties. They identified and exploited them. Modern industrial processing does the same thing. We've just outsourced the knowledge to factories. Why we lost this knowledge? Specialization and surplus destroyed the incentive to process completely. When you can buy leather, you don't need to tan hide. When you can buy glue, you don't need to boil hooves. We traded comprehensive knowledge for efficiency in specific domains that works in abundance. It fails in scarcity. None of this required advanced tools. It required procedural knowledge. The technology was the sequence. Kill the animal, bleed it immediately to preserve meat quality. Process organs first because they spoil fastest. Strip the hide while the carcass is still warm because cold tissue is harder to separate. Separate sinew while fresh because it dries into unusable clumps. Crack bones before marrow solidifies. The technology was embedded in timing, not equipment. Vikings didn't have better knives. They had better protocols. This is why survival fails in modern contexts. We focus on gear. Vikings focused on process. A good knife helps. Knowing which part to cut first and why is what actually keeps you alive. The invisible technology was cultural transmission. Children learned processing by age 7, not as education, as labor, apprenticeship through repetition. By adulthood, the system was automatic. No one had to think about it. It was muscle memory applied to resource extraction. Complete utilization wasn't just practical. It was psychologically stabilizing. Waste creates cognitive dissonance in resource-scarce environments. The material had value. You discarded it. That dissonance becomes stress. Vikings eliminated that loop by eliminating waste. There was no decision fatigue about what to keep. You kept everything. This also created predictability. Every animal yielded the same categories of resources. You knew exactly what you'd extract before you started. Predictability reduces anxiety. Modern humans experience decision paralysis because we have too many options and no framework for evaluation. Vikings had complete frameworks. 1 animal, 12 material categories, fixed processing order. The work was hard, but the decisions were simple. This also reinforced community interdependence. Processing required multiple people. Smoking meat while someone else scraped hide, while another person split bones. Cooperation wasn't ideological. It was mechanical. The system required it, and that created social cohesion as a byproduct of thermodynamic efficiency. Today, we process animals in factories and discard 40 to 60% of the carcass as byproduct. We call it waste. Vikings would call it system failure. We've optimized for speed, not yield. Industrial processing prioritizes the most profitable cuts and discards the rest because labor costs exceed material value. That equation only works in surplus economies. The moment supply chains break, we lose access to 60% of potential resources because we don't know how to extract them. We're not more advanced. We're more specialized. Specialization is a luxury. Vikings couldn't afford luxury. They built systems that worked in scarcity, which meant they also worked in abundance. Our systems work in abundance and collapse in scarcity. We've traded resilience for convenience. That's not wrong. It's just a choice with consequences. And when consequences arrive, convenience doesn't keep you warm. The lesson is not to process your own animals. The lesson is to understand complete system utilization. Vikings looked at constraints and asked, what can this provide? Modern thinking looks at abundance and asks, what do I want? One framework builds resilience. The other builds dependency. You can apply this to anything. Time, attention, materials, relationships. Most people use 20% of available capacity and discard the rest because they don't see it as useful. Vikings saw everything as useful because they had to. Principal transfers in any system, inefficiency invisible, and you can't afford it. Scarcity doesn't create new solutions. It reveals existing waste. You don't need to live like a Viking. You need to think like one when evaluating your own systems. What are you discarding that has function? What processes have you outsourced that you can't replicate? Where does your system fail? If one input disappears? Those are the questions that mattered in 900 AD, they still matter now. We've just been lucky enough not to answer them yet. Vikings didn't process animals completely because they loved nature. They did it because incomplete processing meant death. This channel examines systems built under that constraint. Not for nostalgia, not for philosophy, for the engineering principles that emerge when failure has consequences. If that framework matters to you, stay.